Welcome to the Simple Minds podcast, where six mates unpack three topics over a new drink each week. Fuck it, just go with that. We'll fix it if it's...
All right, welcome to episode 21 of the Simple Minds podcast. I'm your host today, Matt Hanham, and before I introduce my compadres, is that how you say it, compadres? I've chosen a very important drink today. I spent a lot of time considering this as I went to the fridge 5 minutes earlier, and so we're all drinking a James Squire 150 Lashes. Gentlemen, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Ooh.
I welcome to the back to the room Mr. Conrad Swaggy C Francis.
G'day.
Welcome back. A couple of weeks abroad.
Yeah, I only missed a week though, didn't I?
I don't know. It felt like longer. We missed you a lot.
Well, that's lovely to know.
It's good to know. Mr. Justin Bourn.
What's up?
And a special guest appearance from Mr. Jacob.
Thanks, guys.
Mr. Jacob.
Excited to be back.
Yeah, so we're down 3.
We're down 3 plus 1. Mr. Jacob Moffitt.
Shout out to Hato.
Shout out to Hato, who's not with us this afternoon for reasons unknown.
Yeah,
Marco,
very
g'day,
unknown.
buddy. He's in Malaysia.
Marco's in Malaysia. And Michael's in Scotland.
Michael's in Scotland. Far out. We're all over the place.
All over and you were in the US last
I was
week.
in the US last week.
So lots of
Going
travel.
global, mate.
Yeah, that's right. Last weekend I was, I drove around the corner, so I went nowhere.
So any story behind the 150?
Yep. The story behind the 150 is I painstakingly considered what drink I should bring today.
Well, this is
what I got down to is a really deep thought of, it's a really lovely 26 degrees sunny afternoon on a Friday. We're at the end of April. We're so blessed to still have some great sunlight. And there was 150 Lashes in the fridge.
Well, you might as well have the office staple. I mean, this is our staple.
Is the office staple.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
do you guys have a beer roster here?
In what regards?
Like, do you guys do the circuit as to who brings a beer on Fridays?
No.
We do it in our office, so...
We just top it up. But Lashes is the default.
We've had to drink some crap in our office.
I've seen your office.
I've generally bought the crap.
It wouldn't be price related, I'm sure.
No, never.
Anyway, let me have a quick sip.
You don't eat too well.
You can't go wrong with the
James
Lashes.
Squire said there's a bit of a story behind the 150 Lashes. Have you guys heard their marketing spiel about it?
No, go for
It
it.
was something along the lines of when the early settlers landed in Australia, someone kind of brought over this pale ale recipe and it was stolen. And the punishment he received was 150 lashes with the whip or whatever they call it. So
You might this up.
no, that's
It's actually it's on the bottle.
Did you read the bottle?
I've just seen it written on the bottle. 150 Lashes plus 2 barrels of ale.
There you go.
He was a
Must be true.
He was a far better brewer than a thief. Very good.
Must be true.
It must be true.
So I wonder
There's no sales in that, right?
And I wonder if that's a true story that they built it around, or they named it randomly and built a story around that.
I think it's more likely the latter.
Yeah.
We build stories around bullshit all the fucking time.
Yeah.
And
That's just
speaking
what we
of
call
building
life.
stories around bullshit, why don't we open up the floor with Conrad Francis for the first topic?
Oh, really? You want to open with me?
We can. Well,
Yeah,
let's do that.
There's four lads in this room, and I want to talk about self-love.
oh God! In what way?
Here we
Why, in the medical in a medical framework? Actually, okay, we'll forget you. We'll flip to Jacob. No, let's start with self-love.
I've just spent 7 days, 10 days, something, whatever, in the US. Probably 7 days on the floor, 3 days in the damn air. And I was attending a what did you call it? Personal development training, coaching course, or whatever, run by
Donald Trump?
No, it's run by William Whitecloud, the author of The Magician's Way. It was called Alchemy for Success. So there's a lot of discussion around the alchemic process and how you can transform through the path of alchemy to attaining your true gold in life. So this is the second part of a 3 or 4 part course that I've given myself to do. And what was raised was that the key to any sort of personal development has to be through the eye of self-love, being the real foundation of you as a human being. And I've played with this for a while, and with myself, probably over the last 10, 15 years. And in more recent times, anyone that I tended to mentor, I didn't say play with myself, I said played. Okay. All right, we've got to move on because we've got a bit of laughing going on.
Well, we're having a beer, right?
So, in more recent times, anybody that I've done any sort of mentoring with, I've asked them to spend some time in the space of self-love in front of a mirror and ask themselves that question is to how, if they love what they see, and what they see not at a superficial external perspective, but what you see on an internal perspective. And on average, and I've put that question in a room of women, and I can't. I think that the biggest group I spoke to was about 50 women, and about every one of them went for the tissues because they were crying with the answers what they saw. And in most instances, when I've worked people one-on-one from a mentor perspective, it's taken them a good 2 to 3 months to get to not crying. And when I say look at yourself, I mean look at the pupils in your eyes and look at your soul. And do you love what you see? So there's a quote that I generally work with, and I'll put on the table. I want to open it up to you guys. I mean, obviously, because we're all fairly big in the personal development space, good, bad, or indifferent. And I'd love to see where you guys sit with it. And I haven't worked with any one of you guys in that space, right? I've done in the personal space, but I'll put this out here. Work on being in love with the person in the mirror who has been through so much but still standing. Now, if you were to grab your phones and put them on selfie modes right now and ask yourself that question, I'd really be interested to see where your first emotional step went.
Repeat the statement.
Work on being in love with the person in the mirror who has been through so much but is still standing. There's silence here.
Silence in the room.
There's silence. I can just see everyone's vacuum just back inside themselves right now.
I've tried an exercise where I've looked in the mirror and sat there and said I'm going to look in the mirror for 3 minutes.
Yep.
Just stare at myself and look at myself for 3 minutes. And you do. I mean, it was a while ago, so I'm just trying to sort of. I guess I'll be paraphrasing anything that I sort of thought of, was talking to myself, the language I was saying to myself. But I did find myself towards the end of that very much smiling at myself and actually feeling like a more positive line of thinking, and having a really good. It was interesting having a really deep sort of look at yourself, right in your eyes. And I really liked that statement in terms of the part about, I guess, the saying that you've been through so much and then reflecting on that you're still standing. And I do see that, and certainly my journey over the last at least decade to decade and a half of going through so many different things. Not that you didn't earlier, but I think that's the adult piece that's much easier to remember and consider versus when you're a child, etc. And I'm just showing that's relevant to my age, obviously being like mid-30s. So I really am, I guess, proud of myself and could see myself smiling to myself around what I'd been through and having been through. But I do feel like I've been through a lot, and that was part of the process. So that's sort of my share on it, and something I'd like to try again. I just have another good deep look at myself in the mirror. And there's certainly not that there wasn't anything that I was unhappy about. Of course there is. There's things that we want to do and things that we want to change when we look at ourselves, and I guess you're looking or trying to look at your character in a lot of ways. But yeah, I found that as an interesting exercise.
Well, I mean, Justin and Jacob, what's the first emotion that comes to mind when you think of that type of statement? I'm not saying you have to say it word for word, but if you think of the reflection that would cause, where would the first emotional step be for you guys?
The first thing I thought of is that we are our own greatest critics, in that we're always going to be harder on ourselves than anyone else is. And if we're always reflecting on what could have been or what could have been better, or we're always looking for that extra bit of performance or improvements, and therefore everyone sees that external, oh, everything's going great, you're looking really happy, you're looking really well, but then there's that part of you that's always looking for that little bit extra and is just always falling a little bit short, perhaps, until you really look at yourself and reflect on looking at not just how much you've improved or fallen short of a target recently, but versus how far you've come along the journey, and kind of being able to reflect on all the ups and downs, the wins and losses, and go, cool. In perspective, I've got it pretty good compared to most people, even compared to where you were. So I guess
it's interesting that you use the word compare, right?
Yeah.
Because where I'm going with this, you've really got to shake everything off what you've attached yourself to. Comparisons don't exist. They don't exist. The element of love that you're coming to the game with has to be unconditional. Your love of self has to be unconditional.
Your comparisons to your expectation, right? I mean, you're not.
Does it? I mean, this is what.
I feel like when I do, because I agree. I mean, I talked about the lighter side, or after a couple of minutes, I was able to. I moved through a process that I could then smile at myself and just sort of say, you know what, that's it's okay. But certainly the first, if I remember it correctly, the first sort of piece of it was I guess analysing my performance and result and things like that, like you say, Jacob. So
work on being in love with the person in the mirror who has been through so much but still standing.
Yeah, but I think when I first looked in the mirror, I reflected on the things that, or the deficit, more like what Jacob's talking about, and then was able to, and then started to consider, giving myself credit for what has been done. But I think when you start to look at deficit, you're not looking at against everyone else or as a collective. You're comparing yourself against your expectation of what you should have done or where you should be or what that is. It's not necessarily an outward thing; it's an inward thing.
But again, to love yourself unconditionally, does a deficit actually exist?
No, it doesn't. But I'm saying that's where I felt like I started in terms of where my thinking went, and then as I was able to think a little further on it, I got to the point of accepting those things that I started off thinking that were, the thinking was problematic.
I'm really similar. I think in order to love yourself in present moment unconditionally, that comes with the full journey you've been through and all those little moments that have added up to where would have gotten you to where you are today.
All the shit, right?
Yeah.
It has to be all the shit.
Yeah, 100%. And accepting that, and accepting where you've maybe fallen short of expectations, but then being, cool, I'm okay with that. I love who I am. I love where I'm going and the journey I'm on. And yeah, if you can't let go of those losses, and that's where you maybe can't unconditionally, because you're putting a condition on having fallen short or having missed a mark or that one that got away. Whereas if you're happy to accept that and kind of be in the present moment and go, this moment now and everything I've been through I'm in love with, then yeah, absolutely.
And accepting that you're going to be critical of yourself, and knowing that you will at certain times default into that and be critical, and then letting that pass
isn't a problem in itself.
No, it's not, but that's another part of it, because you will give yourself grief over something you feel like you should have done or a way you should have been, and then it's not focusing on that, and it's letting that pass through, and that just being another one of the thoughts in the in your brain and in the mind and in your process.
And I think this is the issue. No one's saying you can't feel, right? That's, I think, where I'm coming from, is that self-love has to be coming from a place of unconditional love. Happy with all the shit as well as all the good stuff, all the stuff that hasn't been achieved, all the stuff that has been achieved, all the things that you'd love to achieve, all the hearts you've broken, the heads you've given headaches to. It's all part and parcel of the journey you're on.
Yeah.
My biggest point is, where do you sit if that question there, if self-acceptance and self-love doesn't sit, any level of personal development, any level of projected love, i.e. to your partners or to your children, to your family, your friends, how real can it be?
where does self-love, so obviously, to me, it still kind of stems back to like this expectation, or some sort of reference point. Where can you be in, like, can you still have self-love, but then still hold high expectations of yourself?
Yeah, why not? Of course you can. You just can't judge yourself on failure, right? You can hold yourself accountable. You just can't judge yourself on failure.
Then where does the line also blur between actually being honest with yourself and just allowing things to kind of, I guess, excuses? Because, I think as well, there's that fine line between accepting, but then accepting it and then kind of, I guess, supporting it with an excuse. Like, I didn't do that thing.
Let me speak from being a father and a person I believe has an unconditional love for his daughter. Okay? In that perspective, if my daughter does something wrong, I'm happy to hold her accountable to that because I love her. She's allowed to fail. She's expected to fail. And I love her unconditionally. So the same would happen to you if you treat yourself with that kind of respect. So self-love doesn't say you can't fail. Self-love actually gives you permission to try hard and try real hard, because if you do fail, that's okay. But not trying is not good enough. And if you coming from a place of self-love, not trying is actually more harmful than trying and failing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And can I dig a bit deeper on the term self-love and how we're defining it as well? Like, my understanding or perspective on it is it's not just the language, and your internal dialogue is obviously one aspect of it, sure, but your actions, like for me, coming from a kind of fitness background, good point. People physically looking after their body through nutrition or training or meditation or yoga, people internal dialogue, like you could have really good internal, you're really accepting of yourself and you're really like self-love from an internal language point of view, but neglect your body physically. Or you could have really good nutrition but also have real big hang-ups around certain issues. So
but as long as you're okay with whoever you are and whichever form you present, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the issue. If you, and for the want of not offending anybody here, but if you want to be a large person, then you can be a large person.
Yeah.
Yeah? If you want to be a skinny person, you can be a skinny person. It's the problem you have with self-love and the conditioning of that is the large person that wants to be skinny but not prepared to respect themselves enough to do the work.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Whether it be diet or exercise or whatever. That's, that's a massive internal conflict going on there. And I've used weight as an example, but I can use wealth as another example, where the people that want to drive the flash cars but want to use debt to do it and not make the sacrifices in their lives to save for it.
Well, it's an awareness piece, right? I mean, so basically the mirror is an awareness, is a tool to
accountability coach,
to help bring awareness to, because that person who's larger, as you say, probably buries what they know about their habits and things they need to change. Like, it's pretty obvious in a lot of ways, right? I mean, there's enormous industries around it, but for the most part, it's what you're putting in, and it's your movement, and there's a lot of different ways to skin it to get a result in some way, shape or form, particularly if you're just looking for health and have no other targets other than to be a healthy person. It's fairly simple, right? You don't need to spend all sorts of money. You don't need to necessarily do anything very difficult whatsoever. You don't need any equipment. If you want to be healthy, there's a couple of basic things that you can do to achieve it. So, and we know that. We're just burying that down, and we complicate that by saying we need this and we need that and we need this, and they're excuses, right? They're excuses because we have some form of awareness, but we want to bury that away from our present thought. But what that mirror does is bring that right to a confrontation point, I guess, and it's because probably deep down a lot of people don't have that self-love.
Well, the interesting piece on it, and the reason why I started there, and without taking too much of Jacob's time, we learnt a piece over there in relation to what was called advanced communication, and one of the exercises we used to take us through the components of advanced communication was an exercise where we were sitting with a partner and we had to get them to move a pen from the right hand to the left hand, and the partner wasn't supposed to move the pen if they felt they had to move the pen. And so being good with the message and the messaging to the point where you connected with somebody well enough to allow them to feel comfortable in moving a pen as opposed to feeling obliged to moving a pen. You know, we're talking about some very aware, highly aware states that if you can pick up how you communicate and how you influence, then the same thing happens internally. What are you allowing yourself to do to yourself? You know, where is your communication with you and how are you allowing that to affect others? And we all have people around us, right? You've got your own team, Matt, Justin, Jacob, myself, we've all got our own teams of people. You know, 3 of you gentlemen are married, you've got a child, I've got a child, you've got 2 children. Justin's probably trying still, but you know, the levels of communication that are needed and the different myriads of the ways we have it, you know, that simple exercise of actually learning what moving the pen means, and I've used it probably several times since even coming back in a conversation yesterday with my guys, is understanding why you would do that, and a level of self-awareness and empathy needs to come in understanding what the benefit is for somebody else to do that. But how can you move people if you can't move yourself?
And it's a bit of a tangent, but I find the busyness, like approach that we all take to life as a general society, we create this busyness so we can live in that land and not sit back for a minute and think about that. Like the communication piece you're talking about takes thought, deliberate focus and action, and we prefer to stay in this busy zone where we never really delve into that depth of, you know, mindfulness around the activity or the thing that you're trying to achieve, which is very much is useful in negotiation, is useful in all sorts of walks of life. But we tend to we're busy, we're always busy, we're doing this, we can't possibly stop and think about what we're doing because we don't want to sort of confront and be aware.
And the word you just used was confront, okay? And self-love is all about confrontation with self.
Coming back to kind of where Jacob was going as well in terms of definition of self-love, where do you see self-love in relationship to self-worth and self-acceptance? Is love the kind of the core, the root of that, and then that allows the other elements of that to flourish? Like, because I know I've struggled with self-worth.
Yep.
Self-love.
So my understanding is probably the cornerstone of self-development and self-reflection is through self-love. Self-worth is probably an extension of self-love, because worth is an ownership thing.
Yep.
That's my take on it, and my reading has been all around that stuff.
And self-acceptance, is that hand in hand?
I think until you
pretty much
love
the same.
yourself, you can't generally accept yourself. I mean, if you think of that external, you can't accept someone in your life as a partner, in some capacity if there's no level of love there. You know, you don't value somebody externally unless there's some level of respect and love there.
Yeah.
So on the flip side of that, yeah.
And so what are, I guess, some techniques to, is it a matter of just continuing practicing of this
100%,
sitting in front of the mirror?
Dead set. I mean, that's the best tool that I've ever used when it comes to that type of game. And it can, if you allow yourself to go through it, the emotional states that you will transition through are fucking amazing. Okay? There will be guilt. All right? And you'll spend days dealing with it. Okay? And I'm not saying you'll come up with specific situations. You may do that. You know, if you allow yourself to allow it, you'll come up with things. But it's just sitting with the emotional steps that you're going to go through to get you to that foundation that's going to allow you to build back from. It really is a step backwards to go forwards. But all of us want to be here and build here, but not many of us go backwards to get the foundations and footings right to go here.
it's such an unraveling process, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, straight.
Because by the time
It
you,
allows you to wear pink pants and blue shirts, mate. That's what happens.
well, the other, I mean, your skin tone does assist, Conrad. But it's sort of like, but most people, by the time they start to ask these types of questions of themselves or actually confront themselves in the mirror, they're fair way down the garden path of major life decisions.
Well, so it started with me because I was not happy with where I was.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen early on. So what I'm saying is that it's actually a fair way backward that you have to step, and then you realise you've probably made a handful of significant life decisions, whether that be career-based, relationship-based, all those things. And it's a big deal to unravel for a lot of people, which I guess was why you're saying it's so confronting and so many people will cry, because they will revert to that busy approach to life. They don't want to think about it because they know there's things in there that aren't true to the core of who they believe they are, which is why they don't necessarily have that self-love if they were to really dig into it. So they have to unravel that and start
The biggest part is, and what the most confronting part is when I pose it to groups of people, is the statement that you do not deserve to be loved if you cannot love yourself. But yet, what do we expect?
Yeah,
we expect little hearts on Instagram.
That's right.
We expect love, right? We expect to be loved. We expect to be, accepted by our partners, our family, our friends, our children. And there's that fucking word again, expectation. Attract that love through self-love. Yeah, fantastic.
It is definitely an unraveling process because, I mean, if you don't love yourself, I mean, that starts to grow insecurities, and we mask insecurities with plenty of other things and excuses, and like you said, layering and bullshit, and also, society is run off insecurity. I mean, like a lot of everything is run off insecurity. At the end of the day.
Well, the masses are totally insecure, but
correct.
Let's look at the top 20%, and then look at 20% of that 20%, right? And the time I've spent with those types of people, they're Teflon. They are Teflon, and their base is strong.
It's a good pathway to real self-awareness. We've talked about self-awareness as well, because it helps you identify your own insecurities and the bullshit and the excuses that you're trying to mask as well. Like, even going back to the fitness we talked about, I mean, a lot of the industries fueled off insecurity.
Yeah.
At the end of the day as well. And sometimes for negative consequences, not necessarily positive. But that is an unraveling, I guess, process. And I think...
But think of it right with this, right? Now, again, you guys are all leaders of people. Okay, if you can connect with yourself at the nth level, how much of a better leader can you be of people?
I think it's unquestionable, because again, even just on the insecurity train that I'm currently, if you as a leader are doing bullshit actions or thoughts out of your own insecurity, you're not empowering the others and the people beneath you, and you're not leading very well. So if you're doing shit because you're trying to look good for whatever reason out of insecurity rather than self-love, I mean, shit.
You gotta eat your own dog food.
It's mutton dressed as lamb, right? That's what you call it. And it is. It's just an interesting space to be in, right? Because again, just having spent another 5 days, and it's probably the second tranche of 5 days I spent on myself this year.
But it'd be a growing problem, right? With Instagram and with social media and other elements. Oh, there we go.
I heart me.
You heart
I heart me.
You heart you. I mean, it'd be a growing problem, right?
Sure, but and this is the part, and why I went to this point is that the solution to any problem is through the problem, not the other side of it. Yeah. So if it's a growing problem, guess where you need to be? Right smack bang in the middle of it. And the only way to get there is to go there through you.
Also, got to start with you.
Yeah, through you, your experience, your ability then to connect with you and communicate through you to influence and empower other people.
So practical outcome is go and have a look in the mirror and talk to yourself and ask yourself the question.
But is there any reference information that you've used in the past through this that we could check out or go have a look? Or
Mate, there hasn't been any real things other than, I mean, when you talk about self-love, vulnerability, being vulnerable with who you are, right? And probably the best person that I've come across in recent times, there was anything really put out by a lady by the name of Brené Brown.
Power of Vulnerability.
Power of Vulnerability.
I've started listening to
TED
that.
Talk's fantastic, the audiobook's fantastic. I know one of the guys in my office has read her book. So if there's any singular person who I believe would be a fairly good authority on it would be Brené. But I started going through this journey, like I said, a good 10 or so years ago. And I quote every day, as you guys know, and some of the audience might know, but so I'll go through phases where I believe I want to work on certain aspects of myself, and I will just go and search quotes in relation to self-love and then use those as my daily journaling as to how that sits with me. But even talking about it right now, I do feel an emotional stir because I know the power of it if you allow yourself to go through it. And it really is a step and a step and a step to get to who that person was that was born and put on this planet to create some big, great, fucking amazing shit.
If that's your belief.
I don't believe any human being is not on this planet to create something fucking massive.
Yeah, I agree.
That's actually
Just a little
a
different
pretty good
segue.
segue.
We haven't heard that before.
You can pay me later, bro.
Right, but I love the fact that you've got handouts so we can actually figure out what's going on.
Absolutely.
Jacob. So welcome to the content
Thank you.
driver's seat.
Yeah, this is cool.
So the big question I've been, I guess, sitting on recently, and I messaged it to Marco maybe a month or two ago, saying like, hey, if you guys are looking for content, here's a good question. He said, oh man, like, bring it in sometime. And I've got a couple of points and parts to it, but I'll start with, what does it mean to live a great life? Having a look at the initial thought, I guess, came from when I watched the classic Gary Vee video around sort of legacy versus currency, kind of building a legacy around what you've achieved and who you were as a person, rather than just building wealth or notoriety or fame or anything like that. I remember watching like documentaries and a piece around David Attenborough and just seeing like that's someone I perceive to have lived a great life. He's contributed remarkably to science, to documentaries, to filmmaking. He's employed people that have pushed videography and filmmaking further. He's we can look at people like Elon Musk, for example, that's pushing 2 or 3 different industries and tiers, decades and centuries ahead, and kind of go, what do we define as leading a great life and making a great kind of contribution? And I guess the second part to it is, who do we believe has lived a great life and how do we define that? So I'll start there and see what you guys got to say.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
I look straight at Mr. Matt.
I've got probably an answer to the first one. If you want to start there. I mean, what does it mean to live a great life? What first came to mind was a to have passion about something, because I feel like without,
So you want us to suffer.
You've got to suffer for a craft, and I'd like David Attenborough as an example that you just used. I'm sure has
Would have to
suffered, and even today would suffer out in the middle of somewhere to achieve the outcome that he wanted for his craft, right? So I think there's suffering, but I think the part B of that is to have your decision making completely extracted from finance. So you literally are in a position where you have the ability to suffer for the passion without having to ever make decisions around cash, and have enough cash and do all that you need to. So whether you're talking an Attenborough or George Lucas or someone like that, and there's many others in probably many industries, I think to be able to pursue that passion and to do it without having to, I guess, make decisions that don't relate to achieving the best possible outcome around that passion. That's probably the biggest two, because I think if you if you nail that, then you bring so much to everything else in your life, including your family situation, everything else. I think you're fulfilled in, like you just said, Conrad, the space that you're bringing something to this planet or planets, depending on where we end up. So
Contribution to me is massive, you know, as a defining part of my value. You know, and I've had this conversation with a few of us in the group. I don't believe legacy is something that you can create. That's something that's talked about way after you've gone. So I'm not of the belief you can create a legacy. You can just contribute and trust and have faith that you're leaving your mark and impacting enough people and contributing as best you can to the planet and the people around you. So I think that answers a couple of your questions. What does it mean to live a great life? Live a life of contribution, live a life of service of other people and your community and your country and the planet. You know, if you live in a life of contribution and service, I think you're going to have value and you're going to leave a trail of that around the place. Who do you believe has lived a great life? You know, I look at the likes of a Steve Jobs, I look at the likes of a Warren Buffett, I look at the likes of a Bill Gates at the very high end. You know, in recent times we're talking about Elon Musk. Now, we're talking about massive guys that are moving the planet through contribution. You know, so that's who I look to. I mean, you've got the olden days guys, you've got the olden days philosophers, and you've got literature people, and you've got other arts people, which I don't deny have also left great movements. But if you're talking about who I believe, yeah, I look at the guys that have moved those masses of people. Steve Jobs is, you know, phenomenal.
But you don't have to be like one of those few key people. Like,
No,
you don't have to be like, because I think as a contrasting
No,
point,
just
someone
who
like an
you
Elon
believe,
Musk.
man.
Yeah, no, I know. But someone like an Elon Musk, for example, I don't know necessarily that he's lived a great, like, I think he's lived a great life around that, the extreme of that passion point. But I think there's other points and other parts of life that many people want to satisfy, and he's had to sacrifice heavily some
Sure.
areas to do what he's doing. But I think
we can talk about Mother Teresa, we can talk about Nelson Mandela. You know,
Yeah,
and
that's
having
right.
spent some time in Calcutta a year ago,
Yeah.
and spending time at Mother Teresa's convent, you know, again, that was about service and contribution. You know, so, you know, I can talk about those people in.
No, I'm just saying I don't think you need to be at the very top. I just think, like, at all levels of our society, we can live a great life and contribute our
100%.
piece. And it's
Yeah.
not just about those few people that just sort of sit right at the top of the pyramid. I think there's just so many, like, you know.
No, we all live a life of contribution and service right here.
Yeah.
The four of us in this room right now, and then I know the six of us, the other three guys that are here, live a life of service and contribution to their families, their staff, their communities. You know, I get that. I mean, I guess I'm just saying, who do I look up to and what do I value? You know, I look to those people because I see the sacrifices they've made. I see where they've started, the humble beginnings. I see the continued change and the legacy they make through their, you know, the guys that I mentioned, excluding Steve Jobs, and I'm thinking Musk at the moment, have committed to donating 99% of their net wealth to charity before they die. You know, to me, that's massive contribution.
But this, I think, can be part of the challenge, and it's funny that you bring this up because some of the questions, I don't know whether I've been specifically asked this question, but I've been going through some self-questions over the last week on a few elements. And while I think of those, like, because we go through all those, and I look to all those people as well, but when you go, who do you believe has lived a great life? The instant person that comes to my mind is my Uma and my Upa, my grandparents, who my Uma recently passed around Christmas. And to me, she actually lived a great life and, like, left this planet, like, completely fulfilled.
So what
Wouldn't
makes you,
change a
how do you
thing.
define that then, Justin?
What's that?
So what made you say that she lived a great life?
Because of, well, I guess this comes back to contribution, right? And the interactions that I had and the state that I had seen her in the fact that they lived humbly, never complained, they were content, you know, they were genuinely happy. Self-love, interesting question that would have been posed. Because my grandma never liked to be in photos, which says there's probably not an element of self-love there. But I think, to me, she definitely lived a great life. And look,
Without doubt.
whether
Without
she
doubt.
had
Ticks boxes.
whether they had regrets or whatever is different. But and so, what does it
But
take
what
to live a
you're
great
talking
life?
now is legacy, right?
Yes.
That she's left you with a memory that allows you to value her long after she's gone.
But it also challenges the expectations of having ambitions and like, do you need to go big? Because and that comes back to the individual element, right? And do you have to be the Elon? Does everyone have to have greatness? And I think that's the part of the conflict I've had this week, right? I have been ambitious, and I guess am ambitious, and so like, what does it take to live a great life?
Greatness. I think greatness is there, but we're talking about, I guess, public greatness, as in like legacy of many, many people remembering. Like greatness happens all over the place. Greatness has happened in many wars where one soldier has done something that no one has necessarily even known who they were or why, but they've done something.
So what does it take to live a great life? I mean, Avicii just passed. He just committed suicide.
Yeah. Oh, did he die of suicide?
Yep. It's come out. So,
But he had pancreatic cancer or something, didn't he?
I don't know the exact details, but
he stopped touring as well.
He stopped touring
because of anxiety and depression,
Yeah.
all those types of issues.
around a year ago, I believe.
I
And,
did listen to him playing Vegas just for... I didn't even know who it was.
28 years old. Robin Williams, like there's that conversation as well where these people, did he live a great life?
Oh, upon reflection, I would say so.
But he committed suicide.
Clearly, he didn't value himself.
No. So did he live a great life?
Well, if you're asking us, or the room, or asking me, I would say he did.
But he didn't.
I would say he did.
From the way that he ended up.
By his own valuation system, somehow he didn't. But that's the byproduct of, I think we've touched on this, setting your goals and achieving your goals. I mean, the guy had massive goals and he still achieved them, right? With plenty of wind in the tank. And what do you
But
do?
no self-love. Jacob.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that Justin brought up was one of the other reasons I kind of reflected on is, do you have to have a public and widespread legacy in order to have actually lived a great life? It's reflected on a really similar thing. My grandfather passed away just before Christmas. Really similar timing by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
There were hundreds of people at the funeral. Everyone was telling all these stories about, he grew up in England and moved his kind of family over, or kind of moved to Australia looking for a new life. Met my grandmother. They've had 7 kids. They've got, I think, 17 or 18 grandkids, and now about 10 or 15 great grandkids. So a huge legacy and so many different stories and people that wouldn't have existed because of that. And they set such a good example about what married life and family life, and not necessarily pursuing big lofty sort of career goals, but just being okay with what you've got and kind of family time. And therefore that's instilled in my parents and my aunties and uncles, and therefore us and my cousins. There's across 20 or 30 people, there's essentially no incidents of divorce or marital issues. Everyone's got kind of happy families. It may not necessarily be the case internally, but at least it's a very, very strong family bond there. And I do think he lived a great life, even though obviously none of you guys have met him or heard of him, or haven't read his memoirs or his book.
But he's clearly impacted and influenced you.
Yeah, 100%.
So we get to experience that through how you live your life.
I mean, is it just as... to me as well, it's just as simple as just leave this place a little bit better than what you came into it.
Yeah, like a net positive impact.
Right? I mean, if every 7 billion of us did that, shit, that's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is it as simple as that? I mean, which is come back to contribution and service. But I mean, you can contribute and serve and still not be happy.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, very true. I mean, the people you're talking about were exactly that way.
And many people will look at that, maybe former employees or people that were close to them, look at Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, and they'll not think that they led a great life. They'll think, his former partner, especially if you've read his story, like Lisa Brennan, for quite some time. His daughter wouldn't have seen him as leaving a positive legacy, because that was her world, was that family and that rejection, and eventually they came to better terms later on. But there's always those two sides to the story, and everyone who makes it big and leaves a huge public legacy will typically have people they've burnt along the way.
I mean, and I think that's a given. I mean, I don't think I'm not going to pretend to think that you can make everybody happy. But I guess...
Well, you can actually influence people in a positive way by...
being honest.
Being brutal.
Yeah.
As long as you're not causing harm.
Yeah.
Then...
But I mean, if your gauge on whether you say or don't say or do or don't do something is how somebody else will take it, then...
Well, it comes back to intent.
Yeah.
Which then this leads a lot back to just as a whole 360 back to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of that self-awareness kind of journey as well. And like I said, that's part of where I'm struggling with, is that yearn, or I guess if you want to refer to it as ambition, because all of those people are obviously ambitious. They wanted to change and have big goals, and those type of individuals. You get the contrast of, just having a small family and being happy. And I guess it just comes back to
But there's
what you want.
Wrong.
There's nothing wrong with any of it.
That's still a big dream, right? I mean,
yes.
To live a happy life is still a pretty, as we know now, right? It's still a big ask, given the pulls on you that you have now. My parents came from another country. I mean, your grandparents, I believe, would have come from another country.
Yeah, they came from Germany.
Your grandparents, so that in itself is a massive risk. They would have had to have been vulnerable to come to another country to allow themselves to then start a rebuilding process to give their offspring a big crack at life.
But I also think that does come back to passion a little bit too, right? Because you can just be passionate about family, and you talk. That was your first segue, Matt. Was kind of like finding your passion. Then obviously, I think the money element is a small component that can hold people back, because you make a lot of shit decisions when you've got this weight, and you might not be fulfilled. But I guess that's part of it too. Is what are you passionate about? Is it just having the best family, or in the world, or because you can be, because everyone's got different passions and everyone's going to contribute. Within this room, we're all passionate about different things. I mean, we've got finance, fitness, 3D, and marketing. And so which is super interesting.
I think I'm equally passionate about some of the things I do, and I've done many things across different industries. I currently sort of, I guess, consult to mainly small businesses, but I'm equally as passionate about what I do as I am passionate about my kids seeing me go about things the way I do. And I think that's a big piece of the legacy, is to show them how to go about it, to show them some risk is needed, to show them, show them that I'm living the best possible life that I can at this point. It's like, and that comes back to the looking in the mirror piece. Like, there's clearly a better version of that, but where I'm at is always persisting to try and, operate and be the best version of myself that I can be, and to pass that, I guess, that passion for that down to my children is one of the key things that really that is my core operating system.
Yeah, and there's those two aspects to living a great life from my perspective. Is one is, how do people remember you, but also what impact do the people that you have had in your life, what do they go on to do? Like you said, kids is a really big one. If you are a great parent, if you're a great teacher, if you're a great leader, or then the people that you touch on your journey and the impact that they have is also a part of your legacy. You're at the top of that sort of chain, and everyone you touch and impact along the way then goes on to make an impact, then they're all part of your legacy. So
Yeah, do you really? And I'll preface it by saying I don't. But does anyone here really start their day or worry about how they're thought about, or how they will be thought about at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation, at the end of the week? I don't.
not a lot.
By my kids, do you mean, or just by
anyone? I mean, I don't. I mean,
there are certain actions or certain things, I don't know about like whether it's from the space of legacy, but definitely would think on how certain things impact others, yes.
okay, so.
But I think the question from me, what you're trying to ask is like, no, you don't sit there and go, if I do this, it's going to positively impact my legacy.
No. You've got to be, in my opinion, very good with who you are and what you stand for, where you're going. And if you're going to influence and lead people, that in itself is your intent. That you yourself have done the work. You yourself know that you're going to do something good.
Yeah,
or
well,
great
who
or
the fuck
whatever.
are you to expect that of anyone else?
Fuck.
And to have any authority to leave, or any influence, or any legacy, like
That's it.
I mean that.
I mean, you only really got the impact on yourself. At the end of the day, that's it, right? If you live a happy and content life, and you manage to impact or influence one other person on the planet, have you not done a decent job?
But I think you've got to have the awareness of that yourself, which is a little bit of that looking in the mirror.
But I think the awareness is there being the integrity within yourself about you, because then if you...
You've got to be aware of that.
Sure. So if you take the step, if you move in the right direction or move in a direction that you're comfortable with, and it might mean you fail. It might mean that you fuck up.
I think a lot of it comes back to courage. You've got to have a lot of courage to live a great life as well.
Yeah, you got to be fuck oath. You got to be brave. That's the piece of vulnerability, right? You've got to be brave. You've got to break the shackles of societal norms and societal expectations, which I don't believe society is designed to make anyone great. Between you and I don't.
Society?
No.
It's clearly designed for the opposite.
No, it's designed to make you a fucking follower and to not have a voice and to just conform.
And to achieve things for the society.
Yeah.
It's built for that until it spits you out.
So, I mean, I think if you're content with just ticking boxes, I don't know whether you'll ever live such a great life. You'll live a content life and you'll live a okay life, but by my definition, I'm not sure it'd be a great life, by my definition.
Love it. Let's wrap up on that. Fellas, how was the...
That's a big question.
How was the 150?
This is his topic.
Huh? I'm the host here.
He can wrap up.
I can wrap it up.
We don't have
Do you have more to say? If Jacob's got more to say, that's okay.
I was just gonna. The third piece that we haven't touched on yet is what does it take to lead a great life? And from that, I was thinking, what are the daily actions? What are the milestones, the pieces, the parts of the journey that we see are necessary to have lived a great life? So I guess from our perspective, the stories we told Justin, having a family, having leaving a legacy from that perspective is one way you can live a great life, is to have a positive impact on your kids and therefore bringing more great people into the world. One way that I guess I've been listening to Steve Jobs' story recently, again actually, and he focused a lot on creating great products. He wanted to make them profitable and build a company around it, but his first and foremost, every single decision was about how can we make this product the greatest possible, about how does it look, how does it feel, and he thought if he lined up all those aspects and made a great product, people will pay for it, and kind of the financial side will look after itself. So I guess I'm thinking, what things do we do? What are we doing currently that is setting us up to leave a legacy, or for people to perceive that we've lived a great life?
you have a vision, small or large, of what you want, and you start to take action on what you want to do every single day, and you be honest with yourself, and you just start with you and take small steps day in, day out, and that will lead you to a great life. We're out.
Oh, I agree. Honour yourself. Honour yourself.
I don't know. You got to have the courage to step towards a vision that is greater or more positive than yourself. That would, if you were to die tomorrow, that small contribution or effort that you took towards that vision has left some form of positivity. But I still believe it's got to start with you, and you got to take the action. If you're going to talk a big game, you've got to do what you need to do. Otherwise, it's all just fluff, and you can achieve great things, but then you'll go nowhere.
And that's it. And you just detach yourself from the outcome, right? Which is the failure piece. And if you do that, detach yourself from the outcome, that's self-love. And that was episode 21 of the Simple Minds podcast. Fellas, how was the 150 lashes?
Tastes like 150 lashes.
That's good.
It was good.
Not a beer drinker, but
tag them in the
I like those topics.
Thanks, James.
yeah, good topics.
James.
Thanks
Yeah.
for coming.
Thanks, Jacob. That was great.
appreciate it, guys.
Shall we?
See you next time.
Peace.